I should preface this review with this. I've played somewhere between 1,000 and 1,900 hours of Warframe. I say that because the Steam launcher tracks the client and game alike, so time spent patching is time spent playing. And also because I had a terrible tendency to just AFK in the game while doing other things. I've also got just under 500 hours of Destiny 2, and I've played it since release, just so you know. And no, this isn't intended to be dick-waving. If anything, it's actually probably a really hideous mark of shame as to how much of my life I devoted to pretending to be a space ninja and a space wizard, but it does mean I'm probably hopelessly addicted to loot-shoot fiestas. Or, if you want to look at it a different way, thinly veiled Skinner boxes. But it does mean that I can pretty easily identify whether or not a game is going to hold my attention. So bearing this in mind, let's move on to my thoughts on the 10 or 15 hours I put into this open beta. The Division 2 does not start on a high note. Storming the White House doesn't feel particularly incredible because it's just so bland. You're fighting street punks on your way in and on your way out, and for most of the game. They're called the Hyenas, and honestly I'm amazed the game even bothered to tell me that, because I didn't care who they were. And it certainly doesn't feel like the game did. The first few story missions are a railroad of boring, go here, shoot this, move on gameplay. It's intended to show you the ropes, but most people don't need the ropes shown to them past maybe the first fight in front of the White House. But this is a looter shooter. We have to learn what control points are, we have to learn where to go for projects, we have to learn what to do with vendors, how to access your stash, how to use your skills, so on and so forth. The writing is barely existent, but we'll get around to that later. Early on, just know it's not good. And it gets out of your way fast, which is a good thing too, because I was considering dropping the game until, finally, the training wheels came off, and I was allowed to go out and just play the video game. Once you're let loose, you get a laundry list of projects to complete. A bunch of points show up on the map, and you can go about choosing how to pursue main story missions, level up, gear up, do whatever kind of side content you've unlocked, or if you're some kind of Philistine, you can rush straight to a safe house and start going about PvPing. I don't know why you'd go play Conflict in a looter shooter, but Crucible's always popping in Destiny, so I guess I won't judge. We won't talk about Conclave and Warframe. Capturing control points involves various takes on hold the zone, as their name would suggest. Sometimes you disrupt public executions, sometimes you reprogram hijacked broadcasting stations, sometimes you collect supplies from supply drops. These actually give loot, by the way, like loot, not just crafting mats. That was genuinely surprising. I wasn't expecting that. And sometimes you just need to clear an area and recapture it. I enjoyed the activities. They didn't really get old in my time doing them, but again, I'm a habitual Destiny and Warframe player here. So your mileage will certainly vary, and I always felt like I personally was getting something out of doing these missions, apart from it just being another activity to kill time between cradle and grave anyway. The freedom I had here to move around and do stuff without going outside the very narrow boundaries of what's considered beta territory was immediately refreshing compared to the railroading the first 30 minutes of the game has you dealing with. And I wonder now if that was somehow intentional. I mean, if it was, intentionally bad design is still bad design, but I can't argue that it didn't have a good effect. So, you're mucking about and collecting shade caches, you're opening safe houses, you're getting loot, you're collecting supplies and what have you, and it's ultimately fun. It was a nice, soothing grind. The kind of soothing grind I get out of, again, games like Warframe and Destiny. And it was pleasant seeing I didn't really mind the distances I had to walk to go and do shit. Sure, the walking and sprinting speeds feel a little slow, but I'm really dim and didn't realize you could fast travel until I was almost done clearing the map, so it probably won't be a problem for people with working frontal cortices. Moving around in general feels weighty, if a bit restrictive and sometimes cumbersome. Walking around is fine, and mantling's actually pretty decent, but sliding into cover when you're not already in cover sometimes feels sticky or unresponsive. Dodge rolling feels really ineffective because of how laborious a process it is. And I found myself really regretting positioning errors, which is actually a point in the game's favor. Crafting is. That's it. It's there. You can get gear. I don't know if you can make the best gear. I didn't really care. Whatever. Shooting my way through these activities was a bit of a mixed bag, but it trended positive. Assault rifles have a bit too much spread to really use past their intended engagement ranges, and SMGs and shotguns even more so. Automatic and semi-automatic shotguns were especially egregious. Once I got a hold of the LMGs, some of the bolt-action rifles, some of the single-shot semi-automatic rifles, a couple of few choice ARs with accuracy bonuses, things started to change considerably. Single-shot rifles hit really hard, bolt-action rifles hit even harder, and they were pretty much just one-shotting everything. Paired with an LMG or an SMG, I could deal with armor and charging enemies really, really easily. Eventually I got a hold of an assault rifle with a fire rate of around 700 RPM, and it was even better than having an SMG. Not quite as good as the LMG I got later, but I was set for pretty much any kind of problem the game could throw at me. Combat became a trivial thing. I only died because I refused to heal, even though you get plenty of healing items. Or I died because I was stubborn, and I thought I could get away with making bad decisions. The Division 2 doesn't make much sense to me, and I'm not sure if that's intentional. The world has that post-apocalypse, Type 2 non-nuclear subclass 1 viral outbreak feel to it, so that's good, but so much of it doesn't really gel with me. I haven't read the wiki for information, I probably won't, but the world is still just so bizarre to me. Is the US devastated or not? I don't remember hearing anything about it. The president is dead and someone took his place, but there's only a single unseen NPC recording that tells you that there's a new president and that they don't like them. We get the name of the new president, but I don't know if any of this even matters, or why it was brought up. This became especially apparent to me, this whole bizarre world thing, once I'd marked most of the things off my to-do list and off the map. And now, thinking back, it's really bugging me. There's vegetation growing over the monuments of man, the classic all returns to nature trope. You know, you see these in all kinds of different settings, like I Am Legend, but there's still so much electricity in places. You'd think that something that's completely abandoned wouldn't have any electricity and working computers and servers and lights, but no, apparently it does, and there's tons of supplies everywhere. There's helicopters flying stuff around, making deliveries. There's plenty of guns and ammo. What kind of state is the world in? What kind of state is the United States in? I'd like to know. Instead, we get a couple of rumblings from a recording we can pick up in-game about how Russia could be involved. How very topical, Division 2. But outside of a few recordings, I didn't really pick up anything about what's going on in the world. Now, it might be my tremendously smooth brain that's causing all these problems for me, but I still would really like it if the Division actually tried to explain itself a bit more. Did I miss a lore page in the menu somewhere? The factions also made me stop and think. The hyenas are just your regular old conglomerate of lowlifes that are tenuously linked together by some word-of-mouth treaty, orchestrated by someone named Coyote. You kill them in a main mission, none of the hyenas seem to care. So why did this matter? What do the hyenas even do other than scavenge? Why do they have green paint everywhere? Why do they seem to make green paint? Why do they huff it? Why are so many of them so eager to go all witness me in combat? The True Sons are members of the military that defected and are allied with the general who was supposed to be arrested and got away, and he promised the True Sons something to make them go against the country they swore to protect and to defy all sense of duty to the United States. Maybe he's got a charisma score of 40. I don't know anything about the True Sons other than what their name would imply. They're the True Sons of America. Sure, cool. And the other faction are the Outcasts, whose name I only know because I went to Ubisoft's website for the Division 2 and looked up the factions, and it says that they're called the Outcasts. The only things I know about them that are noticeable or distinguishing is that they wear torn-up yellow raincoats, and they have a suicide bomber unit that straps a jerry can to his chest and runs at you and explodes. But you know what? All is forgiven, Division 2, because once I walked into the Dark Zone, I learned what all the fuss was really about. The Dark Zone captures that frantic, watch your back, I really hope you're friendly, please God, just let me get my loot, let me leave kind of feeling that I thought that the Division wasn't going to be able to capture. But it did. As I'm walking around the Dark Zone, I strolled up to a landmark and I started capturing it. I killed a bunch of dudes, they dropped some loot, and hey, I got myself a piece of contaminated gear. So I strode off to the next landmark and took that one too. And then things went south. I bit off more than I could chew, I got surrounded, I was pretty sure I was going to die and lose my loot, and then lo and behold 3 guys run in, and they take out the 2 boss enemies I was engaging that were giving me so much grief. We all pick up our loot, we all head our separate ways. I figure now is a good time to go and try to extract my gear, so I head to a loot extraction zone and I find a guy, let's call him Steve, and he's already in the thick of it. He and I hold off the AI, and our loot gets whisked away on a helicopter. We part ways. He does some jumping jacks. I don't know why. I stroll about, and I'm looking constantly for rogue agents because I still don't know how the rogue system works at this point, and I find another landmark. Steve is here. We clean up, and we start sticking together, and we head to a new zone to clear it for more loot. And then the rogues showed up. It was a hard fight, and I lost Steve, but a new guy showed up, let's call him Joe, and we mopped up the 2 rogues, snagged some extra gear, and then we just parted ways. I started to head towards an extraction zone again, because by this point it was starting to get kinda late, and I decided maybe I should head off for the night. And then, there he is. It's my good friend Steve, from the very first extraction zone. He's a lot less dead, and together he, myself, and Joe from the fight with the rogues begin our extraction procedure. We're holding off enemies until we can secure our loot, and then the rope drops from the chopper to have it whisked away, and I load my loot up, and 10 seconds before liftoff, Joe starts to cut the rope, and he goes rogue. I stand at point-blank range in front of him and dumped an entire M60 belt into his head. I grab my gear, and I get the fuck away, because more rogues drop into the zone and they kill Steve. Again. I sprint frantically across the map towards the extraction zone, the other extraction zone, there's 2, and I find another friendly there who's getting ready to extract. He's in cover, watching the rope, and I decide to join him. And then a red circle appears on the ground behind some cover in front of me, and a rogue agent shows his face. And he's just waiting for us to put our gear up onto the line that drops down from the helicopter so that he doesn't have to leave his hidey hole. I say fuck it. I sprint back to the other extraction point I'd just come from, and this entire time, I'm frantic. There's at least 4 or 5 rogues wandering about, and it's not at all that big of a map. As I make it to the extraction zone once again, I find Steve. He hasn't got any loot on him this time, but I guess he figures he can help out the new friendly that's here in the area. We'll call him Alan. And that's what he does. We hold off enemies, the rope drops again, Alan and I load our gear up, and we start to wait. Steve's acting kind of funny. He doesn't have any gear, but he's standing awfully close to the rope, and then he starts to cut it. I get about half of my M60's belt into him, and then he dives away, gets behind cover, and his rogue status disappears. He shoots me once with a shotgun, which doesn't do anything, then he climbs over his cover and he gives me a thumbs up and the loot flies away, secured. I have no idea what the hell happened, and I decide that I've had enough of my time off of the grid, and I head back to the entrance of the dark zone, with a bunch of really garbage loot secured. It's the dim cloud that hangs over the whole experience, really, but all of this entire escapade that I just narrated, happened wordlessly. Nothing but people doing and people reacting. It was utterly engrossing. Time slipped completely away from me. Everything felt organic, dangerous, and fun. I don't know if The Division 2 will be able to keep that up on release, and honestly, I'm kind of worried. Dark zones might get solved, or people might realize going rogue is never worth it. Who knows? But I can say that it was a blast to experience it for the first time, and if the game can keep that kind of energy going, then I'll gladly pay the price of admission. The Division 2 looks competent. Mechanically speaking, it's solid. But like so many shooters, its greatest flaw is in the fact that so much of it is just so baldly competent. Mediocrity isn't the way to play things in the market right now. At least bad games generate an endless torrent of silly shit to read about. Personally, I think the loot grind in Dark Zones is what's gonna make or break the game. Because if Dark Zones don't give out good shit, then as far as I'm concerned, don't bother jumping ship if you're already sitting tight with a game like Warframe or Destiny, or both in my case. Yeah, both of those games are more fantastical in their theming and in their art direction, but if you're really itching for some modern military shenanigans, then just do yourself a favor and go play some Arma, or reinstall Battlefield 4.